we have a book. The CCNP Super Spreader Workbook is finally complete, sitting around 1,000 pages. By the time this video goes live, I've already got all of the links created, and there is a demo workbook for those of you that are interested in seeing the demo. It's a very short version of the full workbook, and you'll be able to download that. There won't be anything that comes with it. There's not going to be an EVE-NG companion file or anything like that. It is simply just a handful of labs from the very first part of the book. It's under 100 pages. So that's going to be what you guys will get as a demo, just to see what it looks like, get a feel for it, and then if you want to take it to the next level, you could always do that. Though I've priced the workbook at $100 because it's 1,000 pages. I feel like that's a fair ask for the workbook. And that is what's going to come with that. There will be a link to Patreon where you'll be able to buy full access and get access to the full workbook as well if you're interested in buying that, and all the stuff that goes along with it. Now, when you buy the full workbook and you get access to the link, there will be all the EVE-NG files will be available with it as well. So you'll be able to download all them, load them into your EVE-NG, or recreate them in whether it's CML or GNS3 or whatever. That will be available for you to do as well. The original intent of the workbook was to start everybody off at a CCNA level and work your way up to CCNP and service provider. That is still the intent. But I decided at a certain point not to do the videos for it. In areas where I felt it was necessary to add in context, I did. If I didn't feel like context was needed, there will be areas where there is no details on whatever the technology is. So like, for example, with IS to IS and OSPF, those are well known and not as difficult to come around when it comes to technical understanding. So things like MPLS VPNs, multicast, and stuff like that, there's a bit of a deeper dive into how MPLS traffic engineering, segment routing, SRv6, that type of stuff. Those areas are contextually, there's context provided in those areas for those of you that are interested in knowing the kind of the behind the scenes and stuff like that. So the goal now is to pivot over to CCIE, and I am going to work backwards in my tracker. What do I mean by that? If you don't know where the tracker is, I have the spreadsheet that I created, and I'm going to start working backwards in it. And I don't have it listed here currently. I'll go ahead and bring it over. I'm going to be adding some labs for NSO, because now my focus, now that the NP workbook is complete, I can now put that to bed, at least for the time being, and then I can focus on the CCIE service provider. And I'm going to be working my way backwards in the areas that I don't know as well. So I've got NSO available to me. I'll stand up a small lab so that I can get that working, and then I can start diving into getting NSO working, adding devices and stuff like that, and then dive into SRv6 in the areas that I need to work on. I'm going to work my way backwards into the areas so that I'm spending the time that I need to spend on the areas that I need to work on. And if I'm not as strong in a particular area, like SRv6 multicast, then that's an area I'm going to hit right away, because it's something that I don't know that well, and I'm going to need the understanding of how that works. So, and then I'll continue to work in the reverse path so that those details can get covered, and I'm bringing those areas up quickly so that I'm leveling off where I'm going with the pursuit. So that is my intent, and it's the quickest way to get me to the destination I've got. And right now it's December 5th. I don't know if I will, by the time I spend the next couple of weeks going through NSO and going through SRv6 multicast and stuff like that, those are going to be some areas where I'm going to have to spend some time diving into. I don't know if that's going to be enough time to get me to the level where I want to be so that I could go take a crack at the lab exam in like January or February. I don't know if that's going to be enough time. So I'm being realistic in my progress, so that I go through the areas that I need to spend some time in. I bring those areas up to other areas like getting MPLS VPNs up and running, MPLS traffic engineering, multicast VPNs, QoS, stuff like that. That is, I'm going to be spending time in those areas as well, but I already know them a little bit better than I know some other areas. So think of it like you're bringing the smallest, if you're on a chart, bringing the lowest ones up as quickly as you can. So I'll be doing that over the next few weeks. Christmas break is coming up soon. I have taken some time off of work, so I will be diving into those areas and getting that all squared away. I have a lot left to cover, and I want to be fluent and comfortable in these areas so that I know what's going on, where it's going on, how it's working. And then I'm going to be working my way through that into the areas that I know a little bit better, like MPLS, TE, inter-AS options, carrier supporting carrier. So I'll be taking a combination of multiple resources. So I'll be going through the Andrew Ohanian workbook first, and then doing the SRv6, or I'm sorry, NSO integrations. I know those the least. So I'll be bringing all that up. And then as I get through his stuff, I'm going to start diving into Nick's workbook, Nick Russo's. I'll be spending a significant amount of time in that to try to bring up those areas as well, and trying to level off all of that. And then once I make it through the areas of Nick's book that I feel like I need to go spend the most amount of time on, then I'll be jumping over to the IP routing on iOS, XE, and XR for the routing stuff that I'm already really familiar with. But there's some areas in there that I wouldn't hurt to go back and just review and be much more comfortable in. So the intention is to try to bring this side up quickly so that it's more like this. The quicker I can bring up the low end, the faster I'll get to my end goal and go from there. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to go over, and if I attack it the way I think makes the most sense, that'll be the intention and the goal of mine to get there. So I'm hoping that over the next, we'll say, month or so, I'll be able to get there, because I'll have a lot of downtime come Christmas break. I'm not going anywhere. It's a staycation, enjoying time with the fam. So if we're not doing anything and I have downtime, I want to be sitting here trying to work through what I've got going on and going from there. So that's what's up with that. So that's where I'm at in terms of study updates, the workbook, and where my position is going to pivot. One of the things that I do plan on doing in that time frame is, as I go up through a particular topic, my intention is to record content on that topic as soon as I'm done with it. So I'm going to have two servers working simultaneously. I'm going to have one that's going to be for development. I'm going to be going through how to get this thing up and running. Nothing's going to get thrown in a workbook. It's going to be mess around with it. If I have to break the lab, I have to break the lab. But get things working so that I can get the things that I need to understand operational as quickly as I possibly can. And then once I've gone through it, I'll rebuild it in another topology or another server, and then that'll be the workbook version of it, where it's figured out already. I'll be dumping that information into the workbook, and then as soon as it's done in the workbook in that particular section, I'll schwack whatever I had built, and I'll rebuild it, and I'll record the content for it from there. So that'll be the intention for that. So I'll be a couple different passes over that technology block before I actually get to recording on it, and I should be pretty fluid with it at that point. And if something's not working, then I obviously won't release the video. I'll okay, where did I go wrong? Figure that out, note it for later, and then I will record the content that's working. You guys will be able to gain access to all that type of stuff and go from there. So that is what's up. I'm going to be spending, like I said, quite a bit of time going through all this and all that stuff that goes along with it. It's going to take some time to get there, but if I get myself into a routine of development, workbook development, and then recording on the content, that'll hopefully make it stick quicker and I'll be in a much better position when it comes to actually sitting for the lab and going through that. So that's what I have going on there. So I'm going to switch gears over to tech support Thursday and go from there. So let me try to answer a couple of these questions and see what we got going on here. So let's say you do the labs and get the CCIE cert. What do you do next to enhance your knowledge in that particular track? Well, the honest answer to that is probably not a lot. My effort to get to the CCIE cert and get my CCIE and service provider and then get another plaque, that itself is the effort. So have I learned things since I took route switch that I would have been beneficial to know in route switch? Certainly. But to me, once you've hit the pinnacle, I mean, once you've got one of these, not saying that you can't get better at it, but the reality of it is most people are moving on to the next thing. They've checked that box is now checked. Now they can go on to something else. Like the guy that recorded a bunch of segment routing content on Udemy, he goes by Ovi, he just posted on LinkedIn today that he passed his data center CCIE. So he didn't stop his technical growth, right? He went from service provider over to data center, and he passed the data center lab. That's motivation for me. I want a second CCIE. So I'm going to continue to pound the pavement until I get there and I pass the exam. So I'm not saying I'm going to pass it my first attempt at the new version, but I'm going to give it a good give it a good go the first time I do it, and hopefully I get close. If I don't pass the first time, hopefully I'm close so I can come back a month later and I can crack it. So that's what I'm going to do there. So my intention is to never not try to grow in that area, but at the end of the day, the reality of it is once you've hit your IE level, can you go beyond that? Certainly. Will I try to do that? I've spent a lot of time on service provider. I probably will let that dog lie in the corner, achieve the IE, check that box, and then move on to something else because I have an interest in learning stuff. So where I go from here would probably be wireless. And because there's a bunch of training for that I could go tap into, and that will hopefully help me with my DE studies. And I do a lot of wireless. So I'll talk pretty much every customer I talk to has some sort of wireless deployed. Having a better understanding of it wouldn't hurt. I'm consistently using EVNG for all of my topology builds. Appreciate that. Yeah, Norbik is kind of a breed, is a league of his own. I've met Norbik at Live this past year. Really cool guy. Had a couple minutes to talk to him before I was on my way to a session. But Norbik is really, really good. Appreciate that. So I'm glad that it's out. Appreciate that. What is your method when it comes to studying, when it comes to reading material, especially for the CCIE Enterprise? Well, one of the things that I've struggled with in the past is reading the content. Like I've got all 3 of the segment routing books from Amazon on Kindle from Amazon on my iPad. So depending on what's going on, I've sat in my hot tub and I've had the iPad with me and I read as I'm in there. But where I'm traveling somewhere and I'm not driving, so I need something to do. So I'll have my iPad out and I'll be reading. The problem is that reading alone, do I remember it? I do, but not. I'm like a couple percent recollection. So I tend to like to be taking notes as I'm going along because I can always refer back to my notes. And so that's one of those things that I like to do is the more senses that you can add to your learning process, and it's not just a one-time pass, right? Meaning you're not going over the material once. You're going over probably multiple times, dozens probably. If you're like me, you've probably covered it multiple dozens of times. So what I do is, one of the things I like to do the most, to be honest with you, is when I get to a level where I'm proficient with the material off the top of my head is I like to record the content, because not only am I reading it, I'm saying it, I hear myself saying it, I'm typing it. So I've got multiple senses attacking it. So I feel much more comfortable going over. That's one of the reasons why I feel like I accelerated my learning process when I was studying for route switch, is I did a lot of that. I haven't been recording as much because I feel like there's some areas I need to spend some time on, and I never really focused on a workbook before. So a workbook takes an extraordinary amount of time to develop and build. I've written 2 of them so far, and I've done 2 in 2 years. One at the IE level, and then another one at the NP level. There's a lot more content to cover in service router than there is in routing and switching. So that's why the NP workbook took so long. I finally settled in on it a few months ago, and I was able to bang it out and get it done. But there was a lot of labbing to try to figure out how to get stuff done. So that's what I like to do, is the more senses, the more inputs you can give to yourself on what's going on. As a matter of fact, I've told this story before, but I remember being in RTP, 3rd lab attempt, and it's, I believe, right after lunch. And so I was, it was shortly after lunch. And I had gotten to the DMVPN portion of the exam, and I couldn't get it working for some reason. And I had gotten to the exact same point in my 3rd attempt that I was in my 2nd attempt, and I was still things were not working. And I was just like, this is going to be a 4th attempt. I was like, I can't do this a 4th time. Like, I need to figure this out. I had plenty of time left, but I was still stuck at the same point. So I ended up leaving to go to the bathroom. I come back, and as I'm walking back, you get one of those "Hello, my name is" sticky tags. It's like 2.5 by 4 inches wide or something like that. It sticks onto your shirt. Well, and it says I'm looking at it right now. It's red. It's got your track number or track written on it. You're a CCIE candidate. So as I'm walking back to the lab, there was a guy walking, a little taller than me, long brown hair, and he sees me, he points and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "How's it going?" And he goes, without getting specific, "How's it going?" And I go, "It's going okay." And he goes, "You don't seem," he's like, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was like, "I can't get DMVPN to work." And he goes, "Huh." I was like, "What's wrong?" And so I started giving him the breakdown, and it's I think DMVPN is still on the enterprise infrastructure exam, and I don't know and I haven't looked at it, so I don't know what the specifics are. So I don't want to cross an NDA line, but I told him what the issue was that I was seeing in the exam, and as I was saying it out loud, I heard it, and then I had a light bulb moment. I knew what to do. So I still refer to this person as CCIE Jesus, because if it wasn't for him stopping me, I don't know if I would have figured it out. I want to think that I would be smart enough to figure it out, but you never know. So I decided to, as soon as he realized, I realized what was up, he goes, "Good luck to you, man." And I said, "Appreciate it." I ran back, well, I won't say ran. I rushed back to my computer, and I did a show run section EIGRP, realized what I was missing, made my change, and voila, things started to work, and then all of my verifications started to work, and I'm like, this might actually get pulled out. And then 2 o'clock the following morning, I found out that I passed. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, is the more comfortable you are with it, the better off you're going to be. So reading material alone, in my opinion, is not enough to pass a CCIE. Can you please advise the roadmap for CCISP for someone? Let's say he studied NP, Encore, and RC and wants to get into SP domain, and when you say a particular course and you say you were recommended this course from, for example, CCNP SP Core Workbook, Step 2 INE SP Core course, and passing to the IESP, what must do courses and lab workbooks? I think this might need a video alone, but but would be very valuable to cover the resources on the SP roadmap, especially since you studied NP-SP at the time resources were minimal. Loaded question, but there's multiple sources. Like it's been, the best way I can describe it is like an onion, right? You've got there's multiple layers to an onion, and you take your time going through and peeling back each layer of the onion, and just think of that as each topic. So, and each topic has its own rabbit hole that you can go down. So, back when I was first studying for it, my intention was to get the IE, but I started with NP because I knew that was going to be a big chunk of my learning was going to come just from NP. So I sunk my time into that, but I used, at the time, it was INE's SPB3 video series. I watched all of that. And I was like, oh, this is actually not that difficult. I could pass this. Changed jobs, got shifted to a different track. I was now doing security. So basically it's like hitting the reset button, and I had to start over from basically zero. And I spent probably a month doing a bunch of CCNA security just so I could get up to speed on how ASA worked, FTD, ICE, the FMC, VPNs, web and email security, cloud security. There were so many different moving parts. Security, to me, is the most difficult CCIE to get because there's so many moving parts. So many different operating systems you could get tested on, and they do test you on a lot. I've taken the security lab. It's no joke hard. So when I hit the reset button for service provider and went over to security, I really should have just sunk my time in at work for security and then circled back when I was on my off time and bridged the gap for service provider, because at that point in time the exam had switched to version 4 and they had added some topics that I wasn't as familiar with, and I stayed with it for a little while. But the problem is INE's content, and this is not a bash on them, INE's content covers a portion of the exam. I would say probably a quarter, and that's a reasonable estimate. Maybe a third of the exam is covered in their video course. There's a lot that's missing, and and if you don't believe me, the simple thing to do would go to their website. If you don't have access to INE, go, and they're the only ones that I know of that has a robust service provider coverage. Go look at their IESP content for version 5 and go through the playlist and compare that to the topic scope for the lab exam. And you'll notice there's some significant disparities. That's what I'm talking about. It's not that they're not a good platform to start with. That's where I started. And I went all the way through version 3, I went through version 4, end to end. I did their workbooks. So I was generally familiar with some stuff, but when I sat for the lab, I realized how much they didn't cover. And that's when you really realize it, is when you're in the exam and you're like, holy crap, there's a lot left to know. So now I don't know what they cover in version 5. I can speculate, because if you can Google, I can Google. You can kind of figure out where things are at if you know what to look for. So INE's CCIE service provider content was where I started. I went through the NP service provider content, and it was a lot of looking up, Googling things, and then a guy that I worked with at the time, he had just finished going through there was a Cisco course you could take, and there was a bunch of PDFs that he had gotten. He shared them with me, and that's what really helped propel me, is going through those PDFs and getting up to speed for NP Service Provider. And then I cracked NP Service Provider and was going down the IE path. Nick's book came out about that time. It was 2016. And I had spent quite a bit of time, and to be completely honest, his book was over my head. It was too advanced for me for what we were diving into, and that's when I realized that I needed to be much deeper. And so that's when I started really looking at documentation, trying to understand white papers, get a better technical understanding. And I didn't work for a service provider. So it was really hard to justify the amount of time and effort. So they've made the service provider exam more difficult over time because the technology has evolved. So that's kind of where that comes into play. So that's a kind of a Cliff Notes version of it. It's kind of hard for me to answer some of this stuff because I haven't passed. So I can't tell you what all I've done to pass because I haven't checked that box yet. I think this will happen. I'll come back and I'll do a more involved video on this specific question because then it'll be a legitimate answer from somebody that's passed their SPCCIE. The age of a human is not enough to finish all the details of the SP multicast types and details. You're not lying. There's a lot that goes into it. There are around 30 profiles to do, and each one of them is a slight variation from the others, depending on if you want BGP or PIM, customer multicast signaling, so on and so forth. Excuse me. I will be covering this in the IE content once I've gone through it. There's a lot to cover. Which Nick Russo book are you labbing from? The Service Provider version 4 Comprehensive Study Guide. May you please share that Excel SP topic file with us? Yep. It's in the link down in the description below. No, Rob, not multicast. It's part of the exam, buddy. Well, good luck to you there, Dirg. Hopefully everything works out. And that is... I think you have to make a PDF book on how to study for the CCIE cert, or at least how to study for the CCNA, and so on. So that's going to be a different, it's hard to do that because there's no one resource that is comprehensive enough to be your only resource for studying for a CCIE. I did think about it, like if I was to create a video series for the CCIE, for service provider, what would that look like? And I have a sneaking suspicion it would be a couple hundred hours of content, and then that's just the blueprint topics, right? Just making sure you're doing thorough coverage of the blueprint topics. That includes getting them up and running, verifying them, debugging them so you can understand their operations, and if things aren't working, how do you figure them out, so on and so forth. But then once you get through the blueprint topics, then your intention then shifts from blueprint coverage over to preparing for the lab exam. So you're taking everything you learned through the blueprint coverage, and now you're trying to build labs from that topic coverage. And then from there, you're diving into the next step of labbing them all out so you can prepare yourself for the lab exam. And to be honest with you, the best way to figure out what's on the lab exam is to go support. That's I was talking back and forth with a couple of people in Discord the other day, and I said, it's cool to be able to think about that type of stuff, but at the end of the day, the reality of it is when you're studying for a CCIE and you've gone through the topic scope and you're comfortable with all of them, you can look at the blueprint topics and you can say, I know this, I know that, I know this, I know that, so on and so forth, for however many topics there are. You know what they are, how they work, how to implement them, how to troubleshoot them, how to verify them, all that. The who, what, where, when, how, and why, right? All of that has been answered. So you go through all of that, then your job is now to take that body of technologies, knowing how they all work individually, and then getting them to work together. And then that's when you run into some caveats. So it's understanding what the caveats are, some of the rules for operations, so on and so forth. You go through all those details, and then once you go through the details, then it's you're building on top of each other. This is where you're building the onion in reverse. Instead of trying to peel it back to get them all broken down so you could cook it, you're trying to put the onion, it's like putting a puzzle together, right? Now you're putting the puzzle together, so now you've got one topology, but instead of having testing every technology independently of each other, you're getting to work all at the same time. So you're doing MPLS, and you might have a couple different service providers going at the same time, so you can test out different methods and ways of doing something. For example, you might have one service provider that does nothing but LDP, then another service provider that only does RSVTE, so just traffic engineering. That's all you're doing in that one, and any connection you make has to be a TE routed connection. Then you have another one that's doing nothing but BGP as the labeling mechanism. Then you have another one that's doing SR MPLS. Then you have another one that's doing SR MPLS and LDP interworking. Then you have another one that's doing SRv6. Then you got another one that's doing SRv6 and SR. So that's 6 different service provider possibilities that you can possibly throw at it, and getting them all to work together. And then you're overlaying things like a layer 3 VPN, layer 2 VPN, QoS, multicast. Multicast with traffic engineering has its own set of challenges. And trying to get all that to work, that's really what you need to be able to understand, is this holistic basket. And so I drew this out once. I have a whiteboard that I'm looking past the camera, and I drew it out once. If I was to do 8 routers per service provider with 2 route reflectors, so that's technically 10, I'm looking at 60 routers just doing the SP core competencies. And the majority of that would be XR, with the exception of, I've noticed multicast isn't as flexible on XR as it is on iOS. So that's one of those topic areas where if you're testing multicast, you're gonna be having to spend probably the majority of your time on iOS, simply for the fact that there's more flexibility. So that's just what I've experienced. And if you look at Nick's book, his multicast section is mostly iOS, very little XR. XR on the core, XR on the edge, with just one router. So if you take 60 routers and you build it all out, and then you interconnect them in some way or fashion or shape, then you have to take that to the next level. And now you've got to add customers to that, so you can do layer 2, layer 3 VPN. And for all your layer 3 VPN, then you got to deal with QoS, traffic engineering, multicast. So that's really the crux of it. Then you got to add internet to that in a couple different ways. So there's a lot that goes into this. So the intention here that you need to wrap your head around is, you have the blueprint first. That's what you got to cover out of the gate. Once you cover the blueprint topics, then you take all those blueprint topics and you start trying to build them off of each other, building the puzzle together with all the blueprint topics. And as you're going through that, you're going to run into another set of challenges. How do I get all these things to work? If you're running multicast and TE, are you familiar with multicast and TACT when it comes to doing your traffic engineering? Because multicast and traffic engineering don't work out of the gate together without some sort of intervention. So that's another example of how that comes into play. Or if you're running IS to IS and you turn on the overload bit, how does that affect your TE tunnels? Stuff like that. So there's a number of things that come into play with it that go outside of this is how technology A works, here's the who, what, when, where, how, and wow, and when, all of those answers. Then you've got the body of going through it and getting them all to work together at the same time. That's kind of where I'm at. There's a few technology I still have to bring myself up on, but my intention is to go through and be thorough in my testing. And so that when I get to the actual exam, I'm in a really good spot. I know the technology off the top of my head. For the most part, I'm comfortable with them. And then I can focus on diving into the details of what is the lab asking me to do. The one part that I'm the most concerned about is the design section. So I think that's where I'm going to struggle the most, to be honest with you. That's where I struggled in security. So I'll cross that bridge when I get there, and I'm hoping that I can do well in that section, and I can just kind of, I don't want to say skate through, deploy, operate, optimize, but the intention here is to be as comfortable with the technologies as I possibly can. So let's see here. What is your favorite lab so far? I think I've heard you say you tried route switch, security, service provider, and DE. Well, the easiest one of those was route switch in comparison. Security, much more difficult. Service provider, more difficult. DE, difficult in a different way. And I haven't passed, so I really can't answer that one because it's got its own set of challenges. I realize when talking to friends that work in I think I've already answered that question once in the past. Learned any barbecue meal? I'd like to. I did a brisket over Thanksgiving. That was really good. Any interesting series you follow these days? Yeah. So, I would like to get back over to, what do they call it? The Terminalist season 2. I'd like to go finish watching that one, but I've been gung ho trying to get done with the Workbook. Now that one's checked off, I can move on. And then Landman season 2 is out. I'd like to go watch that one too. So that pretty much catches me up, I think. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop a line in the comments. But like I said, the CCNP Service Provider Workbook is now complete. It is available for download. There's a demo that you'll see in the link. I'll post the description. There will be links for everything. And I want to sincerely thank everybody for all of their patience over the past several months. I know it took me a little bit to get there. In reality, it took me about 6 months to write it. It's 1,000 pages, and I think 180 different tasks and labs. So for every task, there's a lab that goes with it, and the tasks are formatted to be in the section that they're in. So if you're focusing on ISIS, that section will be there for you. The initial configurations are blocked in the sections that they are. So and sometimes they build off of each other, sometimes they don't. So you'll just have to watch as you're going through. So I recommend everybody join the Discord so that if you guys have questions, I think there is a Discord. Let's see here. Yeah, there's a channel for workbooks. If you're in the if you're in Discord, there's a workbooks channel. So if you have questions about the workbook, throw that in the workbooks Discord channel. With that being said, I hope everybody has a good weekend, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one, everybody.